Welcome back, everybody. In this week's video, we're going to continue the cylinder training. We're going to increase the clay weight to 4.5 pounds or 2 kilos. And I'm going to show you how I like prepping my clay to maximize the clay's efficiency for throwing taller, and some tips and tricks about throwing this larger amount, which works really good and helpful when you start scaling up and you increase the clay weight from above 3 pounds. So let's go ahead and get started. So before I start getting this stuck to the wheel, I want to show you how I like prepping my clay when I start throwing larger pieces. And I normally do this when I start going above 3 pounds, but all the tips and tricks that I'm going to sprinkle throughout this video work really well for anything you throw. And one thing to remember, the more clay you throw, the more difficult it becomes. So every little tip helps on the overall picture. So let's go ahead and I'll show you how I like prepping my clay. And if you like this method, continue doing it for everything you make. So let's get this prepped on the canvas table. So to be the most successful when you guys are throwing larger amounts of clay, it all goes back to the prep. And whenever you throw and you want to throw taller and bigger, I recommend throwing brand new clay from the clay company straight from the bag. And the reason for that is as you use clay and you recycle it, small little clay particles are coming off the clay, gets into your throw water, and usually that gets recycled or gets placed somewhere else. And as you recycle the clay, those clay particles don't really go back, and over time your clay will not become as stretchy, it won't become as malleable, and it'll be difficult to throw it taller because there's just not the same particles that the clay had when it arrived. So I recommend brand new clay. And whenever I cut it off the bag, I like to cut large slabs off of it, and then I cut those slabs smaller to get my weight, rather than cutting little skinny pieces and then folding it, because that can potentially trap air. So this is a 25-pound bag, and that's the standard in the US. And if I cut it into thirds, each third is about 8 pounds. So I'm going to cut it about a third of the way down. And I want to weigh this out to 4.5 pounds. So I'm going to pop that off, put it on the side, and then I'm going to go ahead and see how much this entire thing weighs. And it's about 7.3 pounds. So if I cut this in half, it'll be a little under 4.5 for both. This is the way I recommend you add the wire in, flip your whole piece upside down, and then just pull straight up. And that way your cuts are a little cleaner. And so let's go ahead and weigh this now. It's probably going to be closer to 5 pounds. 4.8, so pretty close. I want it to be about 4.5 or 2 kilos. So I'm just going to a little bit off the top now. 4.18, and you just basically keep cutting and adding clay until you get the weight. I have an angled wire here off camera. I can add a little bit. So 4.51, that's good. It's a little more, but for this practice, that's what we're going to do. And the reason why we wanted that big slab is because we have a big chunky piece we can start kneading, and the odds of us trapping air in it are a little less now. So we're going to take those pieces we had, slam it in, tap, and we're going to go ahead and start kneading it. We'll clear this area and start kneading this clay. All right, so we're going to go ahead and do the ram's head kneading, and it doesn't matter if you do the ram's head or you do the spiral. Basically, you would knead it or wedge it the exact same way. And because this is fairly new clay, I don't need to do it much. But the benefit of kneading your clay is this activates all the particles inside of the clay. It redistributes the moisture, makes it nice and even. So whenever you are throwing larger amounts, I highly recommend you knead your clay, wet your clay a little bit, just to kind of activate those clay particles. And the other benefit of doing it is you know how the clay is overlapping itself. So as I rotate it towards the flaps that I made, the flaps are overlapping themselves this direction, and I made it with the arrow. So I was going this way. So when you put it on the pottery wheel, you want those flaps, in this case it's running this direction, you want those flaps to not open up as you throw. So if the wheel was spinning my normal way, so counterclockwise, my hands will not open up the flap because the flap is getting compressed as it rotates. However, if I had it the other way and the arrow was facing my hand and it rotates, all of that rotational wedging I did will open up because the flap is basically like this, and as it rotates, my hand can potentially start undoing all that work I did. So an easy way to understand which way you should put your clay after you wedge it. So after you wedge it, you have the flaps. Roll it towards yourself to seal those flaps that you made, seal the overlaps. And the right side of the piece should be the top if your wheel is spinning counterclockwise. So in the US, most wheels spin counterclockwise. If you're throwing and your wheel spins clockwise, then you want the left to be on the top. Okay, so in this case, I want my right to be on the top. So I'm just gonna make a little X as a reference, and I'm not gonna tap it into a ball. I'm gonna keep it as the cylindrical shape, and we're gonna go ahead and get this onto the wheel, and we're gonna do a few more tips to help you start throwing larger, and every little tip adds up and makes your life a little easier. So let's jump on the wheel. So we got our clay, we offset the camera to better see the pull hand, and we're gonna go ahead and get this stuck. Now the reason why I don't like getting this into a ball for when I throw larger pieces, or taller pieces in this case, is because I want this clay to be more or less the shape that it's gonna become. So if it's a sphere and I pat it down, it's gonna be really wide, and I'm gonna have to do more work to cone it up, cone it down, and then pull my walls up. So instead I have it in this cylindrical shape so that it's more or less the shape that I want when I dig my well. And when we dig our well, I'm actually going to keep it higher than I normally do because, like I said, the closer it is to a cylinder, the less work I ultimately have to do to it. So the first thing I want to do is get it stuck. So we're going to go ahead and do the same steps like we did before, where we have the piece. Make sure you orient it correctly so that the flap here, this is the flap, it's going to spin into my hand. We're going to rotate it and get it stuck. All right, now, as I did that, the clay looks incredibly off. So we're gonna do something called slap centering. And you may remember this from my previous video, but basically you just tap the clay at a nice even rhythm, and this will help pre-center the clay, so you don't have to do too much work to start coning it up and down and getting it centered. So I just curl my hands to make these into little C's or cup them and start slapping. Okay. As you do that from the overhead cam, you can see that this area is really off center. So to help get that more centered, I'm going to stop the wheel and I manually push that part into center. So you can kind of squeeze the clay too. And this is kind of like slap centering, but in this case, we're kind of molding it to center. So this will help your overall centering process to remove any parts that are really, really off center. Okay, so right there, it's getting a little closer. We're going to do a little more slap centering. You can slap center with one hand if you want. But basically, you want to hit a nice even rhythm. All right, so right there, now we got it more or less centered, and we're going to seal the edge. And so the steps to follow are more or less the same that we have been doing in all our other videos. Okay, and then don't forget your little container of goodies to put all the clay that comes off. And the first thing I'm going to do is get it wet. And I want to start coning this down and getting it stuck. And when I cone down, I always want to get this cone shape again. I don't want it flat at the top. So as I cone down, I'm pushing down, and then I'm opening my hands up to get that cone back into play. And so every time I do this, I'm basically getting it stuck, and I'm squeezing it on the sides to get it back to that cone shape. And over there, that's almost centered already, and I didn't really have to do that much pressure. So slap centering before you actually center with water does help in the long run. I'm going to cone up a little bit. Mostly just getting this clay at the bottom because that's where it's uneven. So I'm really squeezing that clay, and then that's all I need. I don't need to squeeze that much. I'm going to cone up and then squeeze. I'm not going to get it too pointy, and then I'm just going to start applying light downwards pressure And there's a bus reversing outside, so disregard that beeping. Okay, and that is pretty much centered. So whenever I'm throwing something that's a little taller, especially after the 4-pound mark, I like keeping my piece a little taller itself and not flattening it out too much to make it domed, because I don't want this too wide as I'm throwing it upwards, because that's more work for me to get it up. So the width is more or less how wide I want the base to be, and I don't want to go too much wider than that. So you can see it is taller than it is wide, and there is some skirt action going on here, so I'm going to push that in and away. And I'm going to go ahead and start digging my well. So like I said, whenever I start throwing taller, I set my clay up so that it is kind of more or less roughly in the shape that I want it to become. So when we dig our well, same thing. I still dig and apply downwards pressure with my thumbs. And the hard thing about this, once again, I'm elevating my elbows because my back is really sore. You can have it anchored. As you dig your well, the downside of it having it taller is your thumbs are going to bottom out where you can't reach the bottom. So we're going to introduce a new technique to dig a little deeper. And whenever you throw taller, like I said, this is the way I like doing it. And hopefully it helps you out too. So we're going to dig our well. And this one we're going for depth. We're not going for width. So normally I turn my thumbs and I get wider, but because it's a cylinder, I want it narrow and tall. And right there, that's basically all my thumbs can go. If I keep pushing, I'm going to start flattening this section out, and I don't want that. I want to go deeper. So from the overhead cam, you can kind of see how I would go deeper. And this method, you can use your right hand or your left hand, it doesn't matter. But you're using the tip of your middle and your ring finger to apply downwards pressure, and you're digging straight down. So you can kind of feel the clay, and then you're going to pull your fingers towards the clay wall at 6 o'clock over here to then open it up to get into that nice cylinder shape. So this is all set up, getting your inside to the depth you want it and flattening that floor out before we start our first pull. And clay depth, I'm going to go about 1/2 inch, and so that's really good. And now I'm actually ready to start the pull. So as I dug, my thumbs bottomed out, so I used my middle finger and my ring to get that extra depth to open. Now from here, there's a few variations you can go. You can open it a little bit and then pull, or you could do the pull and open, that kind of pinch and pull. And that's the one I recommend if your hands can fit. However, my hands can barely fit at the very bottom. My middle finger can reach. So I gotta basically squeeze it like this, and my pointer finger is elevated in the air. And whenever you're throwing pieces that are a little taller, this is the things you're going to encounter. So I'm squeezing with these hands rather than my pointer finger and my thumb, and I'm just going to pull up. I'm not really opening up this too wide because I want to just get the clay a little higher. So here we go. Get my pinky in there, and I'm squeezing. If you want, you can rest your pointer finger out on the outside wall because that can help really compress the clay too. So this is a variation of the claw. So squeeze. From the overhead cam, you can really see that opening up. And then my outside hand, this is where the outside hand comes into play. I'm really compressing the bottom underneath my thumb, and then my middle finger on the inside, my left hand, is really pushing that clay wall out, and then I'm just doing this very aggressive pull going up, and my pointer finger on my outside, my pointer finger on my left hand is compressing the lip where my other hand, my right hand, can't help it. And so right there, I got a pretty substantial pull, basically doubling the height of what it was prior. And so now let's go check and see what the inside looks like. And so the downside of that technique is your inside, it may not be a perfectly straight flat bottom. So you're going to have to go ahead and adjust that before you get it any taller. And I find it easier now because we have height, but this may take you a little practice. But basically we need to open this up. So what you can do, I'll take the water out so you can see, is with your left hand, try getting used to using your left hand on the inside. You can bend your finger, your pointer finger, to create this knuckle, and this knuckle is just going to basically turn and push into the clay wall, and your outside hand is going to support it. So I'm going to create a vertical wall here first, add some water, because I want this clay to be lubricated. So it basically looks like this, where you put your pointer finger down, rotate, and then bring it outwards towards your clay wall or clay hand. Okay, so here we go. Feel the bottom, rotate that knuckle so it's facing my pointer finger, and then pushing that out. Really compressing the clay in that spot, and then releasing. So you can see from the overhead cam, I flattened that out. I created a little indent or a little raised section, so I can push that down in a way. And now I'm ready to start the actual pulls. So before I do my next pull, I actually am going to collar this and get a little more height with it. So I'm going to go ahead and create the groove at the base first again. And then this time I'm really going to squeeze the clay with my hands. So I'm putting my hands here, really tilting my wrists inward and down, and then compressing the clay and lifting up. And I should gain a little extra height. It will narrow the inside, but we can easily open that up after. So this is a good technique to practice when you're starting to throw taller. So once again, get your hands at the bottom, really squeeze the clay at the bottom. You can really get it narrow, get your thumbs around if you can, and then lift that clay up with this nice collaring. So that really got my cylinder compact. The base got a little narrower, but that's fine because I can always make it slightly wider. And I'm going to get rid of that skirt. And then we just got to open this up a little bit to get our hand in. So we do that same knuckle and we just push our hand in. Get our right hand on the outside, rotate to that hand. And then this time, this next pull, if you want to try a new pull technique, this is very similar to the Japanese and Korean style. Basically, you have that same knuckle. You rotate so that your knuckle's facing the clay wall. In this case, this is around my 3 o'clock. And then your outside hand, the part right below your fingers where your palm meets your fingers, this is the strength. This is the bone part you're going to be pushing into the clay wall. So your knuckle is pushing into the clay. Your hand here is pushing into your knuckle. You're compressing the clay, and then you're doing a pull going up like that. And so this is another way to pull the clay, and this is a very aggressive pull. And it does take a little while to get used to, so give it a shot. And if it ends up not working, you can just go back to the regular push out, push in, pull up. But here we go. Get my knuckle set, put it down, set that angle, get my hand in, push both hands into each other, and then now I do the pull going up. And the benefit of this pull is you have a lot of surface area covering your clay, and you can really aggressively pull this clay wall up. And right around here, I'm going to start decreasing the pressure. And this last section, I'm going to do another collar and get that to rise. The other method to do the pull is, instead of using your knuckle, you use your fingertips like a normal pull. And so that kind of looks a little like this. They use their palm on the outside, left hand in, and then they compress the clay between each other, and then they lift up. So to break down the mechanics of this, they like using the part of your hand where your fingers meet your palm, so where the bones are. And this gives you a nice strong foundation. You start the pressure here at the base, and then your inside hand is pushing out at the very bottom, and then your inside hand starts lifting. And when your inside hand gets to around your middle finger, that's where this hand then lifts up. So you still want that offset, because this hand here will start pushing up and pulling the clay from the bottom up, and this will push the clay into the hand. So this allows you to get a really aggressive pull, so you can pull higher up and really get that clay that's stubborn at the bottom to rise up. The only downside of this technique is it is a little different than most people are used to, and so there is a slight learning curve, and it's often done with a lot of pressure when you first start, so that can cause the clay to twist. So you just got to learn how the clay moves differently and then just make adjustments. So get my hand in position, start pushing out. You can see it bumping out, then my right hand pushes in. Really feel that clay compress between the two, and then I start the pull going up, and now my right hand is following, and I can kind of separate my hand a little bit, so my right pointer finger supporting the clay wall above it, and then I can kind of release the pressure here. So it did twist a little bit because where I was applying a pressure, it slowed the clay rotation down, but the bottom kept spinning at the same speed, causing it to kind of twist from each other. So I can just do another collar, focusing the pressure to get that twist to rise. And then we're going to go ahead and do that technique again. And you can see that my clay is maintaining its thickness at the top. I'm not working on thinning this out. I actually want to thin out the bottom first, and I want to keep this a little thick for extra pulls I can do at the end. So let's get that technique down again. And once again, to recap, you get your left hand, you pull your finger back to create this little knuckle edge right here. This pushes into the clay wall. And then your right hand, this part of your right hand is pushing into your knuckle. So both are pushing together like this. So on the overhead cam like this, and then both hands move up. Just make sure that your clay is lubricated on the outside because it can dry out quite quickly on you. Okay, so here we go. Get some more clay on my hands because it's going to go in. And I really got to keep my left hand at a right angle. Okay, so push out with the knuckle, push in, feel the clay compress, and then do the pull. Okay, the moment you feel the clay start getting thinner and twisting, start releasing the pressure. So right there, I can kind of feel it getting a little thinner below me. And right here, I can stop and then just continue the collar going up. Okay, so just by doing those 2 pulls, I got it to around 10 inches tall. And I still have a lot of clay to work with. So I'm going to do that a few more times, and then I'm going to switch to my push out, push and pull up, because that one is a little more delicate. I have more control over that. But let's do the collaring. Add the water. And let's do it again. And then when you drop your hand, keep your right hand there to support the clay so it doesn't get lopsided as you do this. Okay, rotate, really drive the clay. And this time I'm really driving the clay underneath with my right hand. You can see that undercut forming. And then compress the clay into each other and then doing the pull. So I'm focusing the pressure with my knuckle of my inside hand and then the bottom of my right hand. And you can see that twist forming, and we'll talk about that twist in a second. But I'm going to just power through. Okay, right there I feel the twist getting even more. So let's stop and talk about this twist. So why is that twist occurring? So whenever you throw a clay, if you notice that a twist is occurring, that's happening because of 2 main reasons. Number 1, your clay is getting thin in that spot. And number 2, you're applying too much pressure for the clay. And so when you think about it, when you are doing a pull, if you're applying too much pressure in a given spot where you're applying pressure, that clay is slowing down in rotational speed. But the clay below it is still spinning the same speed of the wheel. So if you slow one section down and the clay below it is continuing the same speed, they're of course going to twist and then create this little churro look. So to fix it, really easy way to fix. You actually just push the clay out and get it back to a wider size. And so this is still more or less centered. So I need to just fix this spiral here. And so my left hand, I'm just going to do a centering pull. So left finger goes in, push out, right hand support, and then I do a lift up. So I'm going to start right here. I'm just pushing out. And then I'm just doing a centering pull going up. And then I would just continue this pull or this collar going up. Now it did create more spirals going, so I can do another centering pull, but I'm going to focus on getting this top raised first. Okay, and now it's around 12 inches. And so I'm going to do a centering pull. So any hand you can get inside, doesn't matter how you push out, but I like using the side of my finger because I'm not applying too much pressure. And my right hand is just compressing the clay and I pull up, going like this. So I'm going to start from the bottom. I can feel where it got a little off-centered. And so wherever I feel those twists, I'm going to keep my hands there for a little longer. And right there, I'm going to push out a little more because that really twisted. And I'm going to keep going. Okay, there we go. That one's better. And I'm just going to go and travel all the way up until I get to the top. So that's a centering pull. If you want, you can introduce a rib to straighten the clay wall. And let's go ahead and do that so you can see how that's done. All right, so I got my rib. And same concept, except this is going to replace your right hand. And instead of putting it right up against the wall to make it perpendicular to the curve, you want it at a slight angle. And the same thing on my inside hand, I'm applying light pressure so they compress the clay like this. So I'm going to start right here and apply light pressure. And then I'm just gently pushing the clay into this tool. And now I can really feel where it's starting to get thin. And so this top section is definitely getting a little thinner than I'd want it to go. And also is relatively thick in terms of the cylinder size. It's about this thick all the way down to here. And it gets a little thicker below it. So I'm going to go ahead and do one more pull. And I'm still going to do that knuckle and compression like that Japanese Korean style. But this time I'm going to focus the pressure at the bottom. And I just got to remember to release the pressure as I rise. And not to over push or it's going to twist some more and it may collapse on me. So let's see what happens. And hopefully I heed my own warnings. But first thing I want to do is soak up all the water on the inside because it's like a swimming pool in there. All right. Let's get my hands ready, get it nice and wet and lubricated. Add a little more water on the inside, more water on the outside. And if you have slip, this actually works a little better. So let's get slip on my hands. Okay, let's create the indent, sponge. All right, and then we'll do one collar real quick. Now this is just a centering collar. I'm not actually squeezing it inward. Okay. And now let's go ahead and do the compression. So get that knuckle. Okay, rotate, push out, push in, feel that clay compress, and then begin pulling. I can feel the clay getting really thin and it's getting a little wobbly at the top. So I really got to be careful. And the downside of with adding this much water is the clay gets really, really soft and it gets a little harder to control. So sometimes if you add too much water, which I actually have been, you want to just be careful. Okay. Let's do a scrape, and this helps remove all the extra clay and kind of evens out the clay wall. And we'll check for thickness and see if I can do another pull using the normal push out, push in, pull up. Let's check for thickness. And at the bottom, we have it about 3/8, so about as thick as the wall. Let's check right here. So about the same, maybe a little thicker. Middle section. We have it about 1/4 inch, so it thins out here and it gets thicker up here, which is fine. So we're going to do one more pull, maybe two more. We're going to do the push out, push in, pull up, and I'm going to focus the pressure at the bottom over here, and I'm going to start lessening the pressure when I get about halfway, and then increase the pressure again when I get a little higher to thin out this top part just a little bit. Okay, so remember, going back to the original technique, push out, push in, and pull, or push out, push in, push down, and then pull. And a tip when you start to pull up a little higher, whenever my arm's in, it's pretty much up to my almost my forearm here, or past my forearm. you got to make sure that your elbow is at a nice 90-degree angle. If it's not, then you risk the chance of this kind of skipping and hitting your arm. And so you want to make sure this is the right angle, and as you pull, it pulls straight out. So this just takes practice. And you may start seeing this skip along my hand. So you just got to try your best to prevent that from happening. Okay, so pushing in, pushing out, compressing, and let's do the pull. You can see that really big pull bump. And as I'm doing this pull, I'm looking at the clay below it, just making sure I don't see twist form. And let's say it's getting a little too much for you to handle. You can stop mid-pull, but you have to be careful. With how big this pull bump is, I run the chance of this collapsing. So as I continue, I'm going to start lifting up a little bit. So my inside finger's right here, and I'm lifting that up. So my other hand's just kind of filling in below it. And then when you can, sneak a finger out. And there we go. I actually thinned the top out a little bit this time. And my cylinder got a little wonky, but I was able to thin it out a little bit at the bottom. So let's see the new height. So it's at 11 inches now. And because it got wider, when I collar it in, it actually will become a little taller. And the collaring will help the twist. So let's get a little water in. And then focus the collaring here. And so the downside is whenever you're using this much water and the clay gets thin, it gets really weak. So having a torch handy does help. So right here, this section is getting pretty thin. The bottom I can definitely pull up a little more. And so right here, I'm pretty much going to stop the pulls. And my next few pulls is going to be a combination of pulling and shaping at the same time. And this is a little more complex and a little more difficult, but with practice, you can definitely do this. But before we do that, we'll save that for the next video. And we're going to measure this, and we're going to see our final height. So we got 11 tall, slightly under 11. And we are still at the a little 4 3/4, or 4 and a little more than 4 1/4. So we'll go ahead and take a break here. In the next video, we'll go ahead and shape and pull at the same time, and we will get this into more of an orb shape. We'll see what the final outcome will be. So hopefully you learned something new from this video, and I hope you are excited to see what we transform this into. And if you like this kind of content, please don't forget to like and subscribe. It helps to grow this little channel into something bigger and allows you to see the videos as they are released. And as always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.